right, shalom, shalom, Yashara, shalom, Yadabar, man. Just want to, talk about this New Testament, man, and you know, praises to the Most High God, Yahweh, man, the Lord God of Yashara, you know, God of our fathers, Lord of our fathers, man. Uh, but anyway, as I was saying, shalom, shalom, peace, blessings to the nation, to the tribe, to the 12 tribes, and peace, blessings, shalom to the TORAH Knights. Uh, you know, hold on one second. Okay, check see if I can be heard because this might be acting funny sometimes. All right, so let's get started. All right, let me share my screen. All right, and as you can see, the topic of the video is about the KJV and whatnot, Codex Sinaiticus. So let me just share the screen. All right. So the Holy 1611 King James Bible. Let's see. Fix that. Let's see. That shit's gonna get on my nerves. But let's see what um we got. First is the text, not the text, but the Codex Sinaiticus, right? Let's start with that, right? All right. So Codex Sinaiticus. What is missing from the Codex Sinaiticus, the oldest New Testament? 200 years after Constantine Somethingdorf's birth, questions remain as to the conditions of his removal of Codex Sinaiticus from St. Catherine's Monastery. All right, now let's skip down and get straight to the meat, right? The Markan Resurrection, 16, 1 through 14. King James Version. See here, it's pretty much the same. Verse 1, and when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome had bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. So right here, and the Codex Sinaiticus, excuse me. And when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome spices that they might come and anoint him. All right. And the Codex Sinaiticus, verse 2, and very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre, at the rising of the sun. And at very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. Verse 3, King James, and they said among themselves, who shall roll us away a stone from the door of the sepulchre? Verse 3 of the Codex Sinaiticus, and they said among themselves, who shall roll us away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? Verse 4, Codex Sinaiticus, and when they looked, they saw that the stone was when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolling away, for it was very great. Verse 4, KJV, when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. KJV, verse 5, and entering into the sepulchre, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white garment, and they were affrighted. Verse 5, Codex Sinaiticus, and entering into the sepulchre, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white garment, and they were affrighted. Verse 6, Codex Sinaiticus, and he said unto them, be not affrighted. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, which was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. Behold the place where they laid him. Verse 6, King James, and he saith unto them, be not affrighted. Ye seek Jesus of Nazareth, which was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. Behold the place where they laid him. Verse 7, but go your way. Verse 7 KJV, but go your way. Tell his disciples and Peter that he goeth before you into Galilee. there shall you see him, as he said unto you. Verse 7, Codex Sinaiticus. But go your way, tell the disciples and Peter that he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall you see him, and he said unto you. Verse 8, Codex Sinaiticus. And they went out quickly and fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. Neither said they anything to any man, for they were afraid. Verse 8, and they went out quickly and fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. Neither said they anything to any man, for they were afraid. Now, you see here on the KJV side, it's a lot longer, right? Why is the oldest, Codex Sinaiticus, why is the oldest Bible, oldest New Testament Bible, excuse me, have 8 verses, but the KJV has 9, 10, 14, 17, all the way to 20? Who wrote all these other verses, man? Who wrote all these other verses? Anyway, Lord's Prayer, Matthew 6, 9 and 13, King James Version. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Codex Sinaiticus. Father, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done as in heaven, so upon earth. Give us day by day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins as we ourselves also forgive everyone that is indebted to us. And bring us not into temptation. So who added all this extra shit? A woman caught in adultery, John chapter 8, 3 through 11. Completely absent from the Codex Sinaiticus. It's not in there. Why? Significant omitted verses. Sinaticus omits carried up into heaven. Excuse me, leaving no accession in the Gospels. Luke 24, verse 51. And it came to pass while he blessed them, it was parted from them and carried up into heaven. Mark 1 and 1, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, omits the Son of God. So it should read the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's it. Luke 9, 55, 56. But he turned and rebuked them and said, Ye know not what manner of spirit ye are of, for the Son of Man is not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village. In the Codex Sinaiticus, you see here, it is not present. All right. Operations, perhaps due to later theological beliefs. All right. Mark 1 and 41, King James. And Jesus, moved with compassion, put forth his hand and touched him and said unto him, I will be thou clean. Jesus, angry, stretched out his hand and touched him. Matthew 24, 36. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, neither the Son, but the Father only. All right. So now, I've been studying this all day, and been studying it too. But um, the Textus Receptus, which means received text, right? Abbreviated TR, is the name we use for the first published, first published Greek text of the New Testament, right? For many centuries, it was the standard text of the Greek Bible. The name arose from the work of the kinsmen Bonaventure and Abraham Elazar, Elazar, right? Who said of their 1633 edition, Textum ergo habes nunc ab, I don't know how to pronounce that shit. So the reader has the text which all now receive, right? Look at this, 1633, right? The King James was what? 1611, right? Well, that's good. It's nice. It's nice. All right. But watch this. The origin of the Textus Receptus. All right. The origin of the Textus Receptus. All right. Although printing with movable type was in was in use no later than 1456. Wait. 1611. Get rid of that. All right. 1456. Damn it. 1456. It was many years before a Greek New Testament was printed. This is not as surprising as it sounds. The Greek minuscule hand of the late 15th century was extremely complicated, with many diverse ligatures and custom symbols. Cutting a Greek typeface required the creation of hundreds of symbols, far more than a Latin typeface. Printers probably did not relish the idea. If it is worth noting that the Complutensian Polygate, I'll look that up because that also is um, a Greek New Testament created by another Edomite, invented a new type of Greek print for its edition. It was not until the early 16th century that Cardinal Ximenes decided to embark on a Greek and Latin edition of the New Testament, the famous Complutensian Polyglot. The New Testament volume of this work was printed in 1514. Wait a second. I know. 1611, closest to the Hebrew and closest to the Greek, and I know, right? Forget about the Textus Receptus. But it was not published until after 1520. All right, 1520. This left a real opportunity for an enterprising printer who could get out an edition quickly. Such a printer was John FROBEN of Basel or whatever. Apparently, having heard of the Complutensian edition, he was determined to beat it into print. Fortunately, he had the contacts to pull this off. For FROBEN decided to approach Desiderius Erasmus, one of the most notable, if rather humanistic, scholars of his generation. The proposal appears to have been transmitted for 1515. All right, or April 17th, 1515. The work began in the fall that year, and the work was pushed through the press in February 1516. For a project that had made 50 years to get started, the success of Erasmus's edition, which contained his Greek text in parallel with his own Latin version, was astonishing. All right. Now, I know. Let's read this right here. It is said to report that such a noble undertaking was so badly handled, right? His work, they're basically saying his work was so bad, right? His book. All the more so since it became the basis of Luther's German translation and later, with some slight modifications, of the English King James Version. 1611, right? 1611, see it right there, 1611. And this came out 1519. look at this. 1516 of February. Come on. And look at this. This came out in 1519. The edition came out in 1519, a new edition from the one that came out in 1516, right? And then from the one in 1519, 3 more would follow, each somewhat improved over the last. Yet, even though they improved, it says, it is sad to report. Sad. It is sad to report that such a noble undertaking was so badly handled. All right. The speed with which the book went through the press meant that it contained literally thousands of typographical errors. Let me read that again. The speed with which the book went through the press meant that it contained literally thousands of typographical errors. What is more, the text was hastily and badly edited from a few late manuscripts. You can see right here. Page 336 of Erasmus's Greek Testament, the first Textus Receptus shown is a portion of John 18. All right. The history of the Textus Receptus. Let's get to let's read this first one. It says Erasmus's first edition was a great success. Some 3,300 copies of his first two editions were sold. That sounds like a small number. Recall that there were probably fewer than 300 copies of the mains Vulgate, and that editions were usually restricted to 1,000 copies as late as Elizabethan times and after. The success of Erasmus' edition soon called forth New Testaments. Let's read that again. The success of Erasmus' edition soon called forth new Greek testaments, plural. The next, all of them based largely on his. Not some, all of them based largely on his, the Textus Receptus. The first of these was published by Aldus Manutius in 1518. Wait, there goes the number. There goes that 15, 16. All right, 15, 16. All right, let's get back. But although it contained an independent text of the Septuagint, the first such to be printed, its New Testament text was taken almost verbatim from Erasmus, including even the typographical errors. Hence, the first truly new publication was Erasmus's own edition of 1519. This featured almost the same text as the 1516 edition, but with the majority, though by no means all, of the errors of the press corrected. No means all corrected, right? It also features some new readings believed by Scrivener to come from three. I don't know what the fuck this is, right? But anyway, uh, Erasmus's third edition of 1522 contained one truly unfortunate innovation: the three heavenly witnesses in John 1 5, 7 through 8. These were derived from the recently written Codex 61, and as the famous story goes, included by Erasmus for the sake of his oath. Sadly, they have been found in almost every TR or Textus Receptus edition since. There followed a great welter of editions, all slightly different based on such figures as I have seen. It would appear that editions of the Textus Receptus typically vary at between 100 and 200 places, though very few of these differences are more than orthographic. All right. Uh, I'm looking for this one part as well. Hold on. Be patient. Salakia. La, 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 la. Right here. Only one more TR edition needs mention here, the 1873 Oxford edition, which forms the basis of many modern collations. This edition is no longer available, of course, though some editions purport to give its readings. Beginners are reminded once again that not all TR editions are identical. These collating against a TR must state very explicitly which edition is being used. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. All right, so right here, addendum, the King James Version. Authorized in 1604, published in 1611, King James Version actually is based on the TR, the Textus Receptus, created by Edomites. Mainly, I believe it's the dude's name starts with the E, Erasmus, right? But let's read. When it was created, there was no demand for critical editions, though, in fact, original KJV contains some textual notes. These, like the preface, are usually suppressed in modern versions, making the version that much worse than it is. In addition, editions of the KJV do not print precisely the same text, but this is another issue. Even accepting that the KJV derives from the TR, Textus Receptus, and has most of its faults, it is reasonable to ask which TR it is based on. The usual simplistic answer is Stephanus or Basis. F.H.A. Scrivener, however, who studied the matter in detail, concluded that it is none of these. Rather, it is a text closest to Basil, with Stephanus in second place, but not clearly affiliated with any edition. No doubt the influence of the Vulgate and of early English translations is also felt here. Scrivener reconstructed the text of the KJV in 1894, finding some 250 differences from Stephanus J.P. Green. J.P. Green, however, states that even this edition does not agree entirely with the KJV, listing differences at Matthew 12:24, 27, John 8:21, 10, 16. This may be translational. 1 Corinthians 14:10, 16:1. Compare also Mark 8:14, 9:42, John 8:6, Acts 1 and 4, and 1 John 3 and 16. Where Scrivener includes words found in the KJV in italics are missing from their primary text. So these words that are italicized in the KJV were missing in these TRs, Textus Receptuses, and the printers and authors of the KJV added these italicized words to the text to create their Bible, right? Now, I'm gonna get to this right here, but look, since there are people who still, for some benighted reason, use the King James Bible for Bible study, we perhaps need to add a few words about its defects conceded by all legitimate textual critics. Excuse me. Plus, most people who know anything about translations. This is not to deny that it is a brilliant work of English prose, but it is not an adequate English Bible. The first reason is the obvious textual one. It is translated from the Textus Receptus. There was no good alternative at the time, but we know that it is simply a bad text. This is true event. This is true event if one accepts the Byzantine text as original. The TR is not a good representative of that text form, and is even worse if one accepts any other text form, or if one is eclectic. The Old Testament suffers the same problem, in some ways worse. The Hebrew text had hardly been edited at all when the KJV was translated. Closer to the Hebrew. Hold up. This is closer to the Hebrew than this right here, apparently. Hold up. Let me pull this up. All right. Apparently, Hold up, it's a little slow because I got a lot up here, right? So apparently, here it's not close to the Hebrew or English translations. So this is not closer to the Hebrew than this, though, right? Okay. Anyway, what was I at? The Hebrew text had hardly been edited at all when the KJV was translated. Today, with more Hebrew manuscripts, the Dead Sea Scrolls, various translations, more ancient commentaries, and a better grasp of textual criticism, we can establish a much better Hebrew text. The lack of Hebrew scholarship at the time contributed to an even greater problem with the Old Testament. The translators didn't know what it meant. So not only did these people that created the KJV didn't they didn't know Hebrew, they messed up the New Testament, but they had a lack of Hebrew scholarship. Wow. Continuing on. Textual damage caused some of the cruxes, others arose from ignorance of classical Hebrew. The translators often had to turn to the translations of LXX or the Vulgate, which often were just as messed up as the Hebrew. Today, we have more samples of ancient Hebrew to give us references for words. We have the knowledge of cognate languages such as Ugaritic and Akkadian, and we have the tools of linguistics. There are still unsolved problems in the Old Testament, but they are far fewer. Same is true to a lesser extent of the New Testament. Greek never entirely vanished from the knowledge of scholars as Hebrew did, but the language evolved. At the time, the KJV was translated classical Greek, the Greek of Homer and the tragic playwrights. Wait. At that time, the KJV was translated classical Greek, the Greek of Homer and the tragic playwrights was considered a standard. Koine Greek, the Greek of the New Testament, was forgotten. The Byzantine Empire had undergone a sort of classical revival. Y'all need to get y'all facts straight, man. Y'all talking about KJV and the Koine Greek. What does this say? Koine Greek, the Greek of the New Testament, was forgotten. Come on, man. The Byzantine Empire had undergone a sort of classical revival. People referred to the Greek of the New Testament as the language of the Holy Spirit and then sneered at its uncouth forms. Over the past century and a half, the Koine has been rediscovered, and we know the New Testament was written in a living, active language. This doesn't affect our understanding of the meaning of the New Testament as much as our increased knowledge of Hebrew affects our understanding of the Old, but it does affect it somewhat. In addition, there is the translation style. Now remember, when it talks about the Hebrew, it's talking about the Hebrew of the Old of the KJV. All right. In addition, there is the translation style. The KJV was created by 6 separate committees with relatively little joint effort and a relatively small body of prior work. This was 1604, after all the committee from Cambridge couldn't just buzz down to Westminster for the afternoon. This meant that there wasn't much standardization of vocabulary. A word might be translated 2 or 3 or even half a dozen different ways. Sometimes, of course, this was necessary. Again, from above in John 3 and 3, 7:31, a case where the KJV translators seem ironically to have missed the multivalued meaning. It is generally agreed that the KJV used various renderings for solely stylistic reasons. The translation was meant to be read aloud. They produced a version. Read aloud, that's funny. Anyway, they produced a version that was excellent for these purposes, but in consequence, much less suitable for detailed study, especially of synoptic parallels, which can look completely different when the KJV renditions are set side by side. All right. Let's keep reading. Finally, the KJV does not print. Oh, excuse me. Let's read this right here. Sorry. Plus, the committee was under instructions to stay as close as possible to the previous standard, the so-called Bishop's Bible, created by Edomite, which in turn had been created based on the Great Bible. And even it was derived largely from Tyndale's work. The Great Bible had been created some 75 years earlier, and Tyndale in the decades before that. Not long in ordinary terms, but this was a time when English was evolving fast. The heritage means that a number of the features, the use of you, ye, thou, thee, thy, thine, was actually incorrect even by the standards of the time, and its influence came to produce a truly curious effect. Thou, initially the second person singular pronoun, as opposed to ye, the plural form, loosely equivalent to the American Southernism y'all, was briefly a form used to address a social inferior, and then, under the influence of the KJV itself, treated as a form of address to one deserving of high dignity. This is generally confusing at best. Finally, the KJV does not print the text in paragraphs, but rather verse by verse. Readers can see this, but it's one thing to know it, and another to really read it, the text in that light. To be fair, the translators were aware of most of these problems, but they still printed it. Preface, in fact, urges the reader not to conclude or dogmatize upon this or that peremptorily, The Old Testament, according to Alistair McGrath, contains 6,637 marginal notes, most of them variant readings, more notes than many modern translations which observe. But I have yet to find a recent printing of the KJV which includes its marginal notes, let alone its preface. I'm told there is one, or at least a reprint of an allegedly exact 19th century reprint. But it's an expensive edition you won't find in ordinary bookstores. Whew, this is a lot of reading, man. Excuse me. And of course, since the time of publication, the language of the KJV, already somewhat antiquated in its time, based as it was largely upon the Tyndale translation, has become entirely archaic. In an aside, we might note that at the time of its publication, the KJV was greeted with something less than enthusiasm. All right? I'm sorry, hold on. I'm sorry. Okay. So, check. Where was I at? Enthusiasm. And for the first few decades of its life, the Geneva Bible remained the more popular work. The Geneva edition, unlike the other pre-KJV translations, remained in print for more than 30 years after the KJV was published. During the Commonwealth period, 1649-1660, there was talk of commissioning another new translation. It wasn't until the KJV became quite venerable, assumed an aura of special value, even of independent canonicity. Quite simply, while the KJV Bible was a brilliant work and beautiful monument of 16th century English, it is not fit to be used as a Bible in today's world because it has so much bullshit. All right, but let's look up this guy right here, right? Johann FROBEN, excuse me, right? Check this out. Uh, right here. Hold up. Right here, on December 25th, 1513, Johann Froben succeeded to leadership of the Amberbach Press in Basel. Though scarcely able to read Latin, he became the leading printer of scholarly works north of the Alps. highly gifted in the techniques of printing and graced with a knack for organizing the efforts of others. For the content of his publications almost totally depended on the scholars he employed. Basel, the cell was one of the relatively few printing centers at this time, also to be the seat of a university, and its professors, alumni, and students who worked as authors, editors, and proofreaders provided him a ready source of scholarly helpers. My concern is to understand something of the relationship of this university community to Froben's press. I have concentrated on the decade ending with the initiation of the Reformation at Bastille in 1523, an event which upset the academic community and resulted ultimately in the closing of the university in 1529. All right, so let's see here. 15, this is stuff that predates the KJV. Johann Froben and the Basel University scholars. This man barely knew how to read Greek, and it's highly likely that he had something to do, or the Ammerbach has something to do with his translations, KJV translations, because they also have a Textus Receptus as well. Okay, so y'all should look into that. All right, now let's look into this right here. William Tyndale. Tyndale's Tyndale's first attempt to print an English New Testament foundered when the print shop in Cologne was raised by the authorities. Only a single copy of most of the Gospel of Matthew survived. Wait. Was raided by the authorities. Only a single copy of most of the Gospels of Matthew survives. Look at that 1611 again. God's word. This is God's word. But only a single copy of most of the Gospel of Matthew survives. Anyway, in addition, printed the following year in Worms, was more successful as widely distributed in England and Scotland to the alarm of the authorities. This revised version followed an unauthorized edition with alterations by George Joy, an English scholar living in Antwerp. It was to prove highly influential. A copy was owned by Anne Boylan, and according to a recent calculation, 83%, let me 83% of the text of the King James Bible comes directly from Tyndale's Testament of 1534. God damn. This is the word of God, though. This right here. This is all you need right here. This is it. This right here. Not this. This is garbage right here. This is nothing. This isn't close to Hebrew right here. Look. To Hebrew. Look. Look at this. Look at that. That's not Hebrew. This is nowhere close to Hebrew, guys. This right here. This is close to Hebrew. All this English right here. All this Hebrew right here is not close to Hebrew compared to this, guys. All right. All right. Remember that. So let's keep reading. See what else we can find. Let's see, because right here, right. This edition of Tyndale's Testament was printed in the year of Tyndale's execution in Antwerp. The printer was probably Thomas Godfrey of London, printer of a number of religious and controversial works, who on this occasion prudently omitted to include his name and address. The opening of the Gospel of John, shown here, was taken over almost unaltered into the King James Bible. Interesting. God's word, though, man. It's the Most High's word right there, man. Most High's word, man. All right, 1582, George Martin. By the 1570s, the spread of vernacular Bibles among the laity had become unstoppable, and a version acceptable to the Roman Catholic Church was clearly necessary. The work of translation done by Gregory Martin, a friend of Edmund Campion, who had been exiled from England since 1569, working in the English College at Reims. Martin translated 2 chapters a day from 1578 to 1580, and after revision by other hands, the New Testament was published in 1582. The whole production understandably has the air of contrablast to the Protestant versions with a polemical introduction and side notes, which correspond to those in Tyndale and Geneva versions. Since the Vulgate was the only version approved by the church that had to be the source text, and it had to be followed as closely as possible, even at the expense of common English, word order, and vocabulary, leading to phrases such as "give us today our super substantial bread" in the Lord's Prayer. The Reims New Testament was not an official source for the King James Bible, but was undoubtedly known to the translators. Now, see, they try to throw you off. The Reims New Testament was not an official source, but it was still used, but was undoubtedly known to the translators. So they still used it. All right. Uh, let's see. William Whittingham, 1579. Although the University of Cambridge is granted a privilege to print books by Henry VIII in 1534, it remained unexercised for 50 years. John Legate, only the second printer to the university who actually printed any books, incurred the wrath of the Stationers' Company in London with this edition of the Geneva translation of the Bible. The right to print Bibles prolonged the Queen's printer, and the appearance of this Bible in May 1591 embroiled Legate and the university in more than 6 months of litigation. No further complete Bible was printed in Cambridge until 1629. 1629. Moving on, Theodore Beza. Beza acquired this 5th century codex of the Gospels and Acts of the Apostles in the mid 16th century. It had been in Lyons from the 9th century until the sacking of that city in 1562, when it was removed to safety in Geneva and passed into Beza's hands. In 1581, he represented it to Cambridge University for safer keeping. His accompanying letter, shown here, recommends that the manuscripts would be better hidden than published because of variant readings. Hmm. This is crazy, man. Y'all gotta tell me what y'all think, man. Y'all gotta tell me what y'all think, cause this JPS, like, this is garbage. Truth right here. This is 1611, man. 11 in your life, man. It's the way, man. All right. Uh, let's see. Let's see. So I'm gonna end it. As you can see, we've been telling y'all, the Torah Night's been telling y'all, the King James Bible's full of shit. All right. Come back to the Torah. Come back to YAHAWAH. Stop worshiping Jeebus. All right. Get up off that bullshit. All right. Allah Yahweh Khad. Barakatah Yahweh Barakatah Yahweh Barakatah Yahweh Khad. All right. Anything else is idolatry. And with that, call Allah Yahweh Khad. Shalom.